Hello, I'm Rev Bill Berry. I'm Dan's stepdad or pop, or Grandpa Bill if you want. Tonight we're remembering what Jesus and his disciples did the night before he was arrested. On that night, they gathered as Jews did for many, many years for the ceremony of Shel Pesach, or the Feast of the Passover. This was one of the three main pilgrimage meals for Israel, where people who could gathered to Jerusalem. Jesus and his family, according to the Gospel of Luke, went to Jerusalem for the Passover feast every year. And there's a part in the Gospel of Luke that talks about him staying behind when he was 12. The Passover meal has an entire program or litany. We're not going to go through that whole thing tonight because it would take a long time. It was one famous Passover meal that lasted until morning. And the problem was that they didn't get to eat the entire night. What you start out with a Passover meal is, in the days of Jesus, you would take a lamb and you would take him to the temple where the lamb would be slaughtered. You would actually just have his throat cut, because according to the writings of Exodus, you were to eat the lamb with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, whole roasted over the fire, including with its bones and its insides completely. That may sound strange to us, but this is the way it was done in the days of Jesus. We know what they said that night, except we also know that Jesus changed the Passover litany because he was teaching his disciples. The meal started, as every Jewish meal did, with a woman bringing in the light and lighting the candles. Here we have the 7-candle menorah. They may have used something like this because it's part of the Passover Haggadah or litany. They remember the 7 days of creation in which Jesus did, through as the Spirit, helped to create the world. Then the eldest person, and that's one of the things that's important about this, is the Passover meal happened in the home. The lamb was slaughtered in the temple, but then you gathered with your family in a home. The eldest person would lead the litany because they would know it by heart. And the youngest person with leadership or knowledge would also be involved because this was a teaching. Part of the start of it would be a blessing, lighting the holy day lights, which the women did. And then we had the blessing for the feast. This is a special feast. So it would be a long blessing. It starts out, "Blessed are you, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine." And it goes on. In this meal, there were 3 glasses of wine before each person. There was also 1 cup before the host, whether it be a rabbi or the oldest person in the family. That was the cup that was most important, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But each glass had a special name and a blessing. The first glass would come as the meal started, but first you would wash your hands. Washing your hands is important now, but then it was very important because you had to come to a meal with clean hands. It was probably in the washing the hands at this point or later on that Jesus washed his disciples' feet. You started out the meal with the blessing, washing the hands, and then you would eat the greens. The greens is a recognition of the spring, the coming of spring. And again, there would be a blessing over the greens, which says, "Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei ha-Adonai," which means, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the earth," which covers for pretty much everything else. The rabbi would explain what we were doing, that it was a teaching. He would read Exodus 12, verses 1 to 32, which is the telling of the first Passover. Part of that meal in front of the host would be 3 loaves of matzah, or unleavened bread. A Jewish meal is always accompanied by a loaf of bread. So I guess those who need to be gluten-free would have to worry about gluten-free bread. But today, it's just unleavened bread. And since the Passover is considered a Sabbath meal, there would be 2 loaves. But since it's a festival, even more special, there would be 3 loaves. And these, whether you know it or realize it or not, these are much like what they would eat in those days. The first loaf, the host would break and say, and this is important, it says, "Behold, this, the bread of our affliction, that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat with us. Let all who are needy come and share in our Passover supper. Now we are here. Next year, may we be in the land of Israel. Now we are slaves. Next year, we will all be free." If you were a Jew in the time of Jesus and there were strangers amongst you, you would welcome them into your house because you want people to share in this meal. It's a part of your worship. One of the main points is the narration of the Exodus. The first cup would be drunk at the time you're eating the greens. It's sort of an appetizer. Then, as the Exodus is retold, we come to 4 questions. The eldest would say, "Ma nishtana halalei hazah makol halalaot." And then the young, which means, why is this night different from all other nights? And then the youngest with knowledge would stand, you don't have to, and then answer with 4 statements. There are also questions.
On all other nights we leavened or unleavened bread, but on this night we only eat unleavened bread. Why? On all the other nights we eat all kinds of herbs, but on this night we eat bitter herbs. Why? On all other nights we do not dip even once. On this night we dip twice. Why? On all other night we eat meat, roasted, stewed, or boiled, and on this night we only eat roasted meat. Why?
These questions coming from the youngest are important because this is the teaching. The teaching is that on this night is different from all other nights, and you were very wise to ask those questions, and wiser still to know the difference. On this night, we celebrate our exodus from Egypt. We go from being slaves in Egypt, toiling for the Pharaoh, to being the people of God. The table before us would be set with the best of the dishes, and each would participate in retelling that moment of sorrow moving to joy, and how the Holy One, blessed is He, rescued His slaves groveling in misery and changed us to the observance of His commandments into His own liberated people. We eat unleavened bread tonight because there was no time in our rush to freedom to allow our bread to rise. It says in the scroll of Exodus, "And the Egyptians pressured the people to hasten them while sending them away from their land." We eat especially bitter herbs tonight to taste again the bitterness of slavery. We dip our food twice this evening in salted water to recall the tears of slavery, the bitter bondage that our forefathers and mothers went through. We eat only roasted meat of the sacrificial lamb this evening because our forebears were to be in haste over their meal, prepared to flee. That's according to the teaching of Moses. Because it says, "They shall eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but roasted over the fire, with his head, legs, and inner organs. If the Holy One, blessed is He, had not brought our ancestors out of Egypt, then we and our children's children would still be slaves in Egypt. Therefore, if we possessed all wisdom and all understanding, we were endowed with the wisdom of the great age, and had complete understanding of sacred scriptures, it would still be commanded of us to recount the events of our departure from Egypt. Whoever recalls this meal recalls the pain, the tears of slavery, is part of that people of Israel. If we forget this, we're no longer God's people. In the night that Jesus was telling this to his disciples, he was sharing the bread that was broken was his body. The cup over which we gave thanks and drank was his blood. After the meal, according to the Gospels, he took the last cup, the cup of Elijah, which was not to be drunk by anyone at the table. And the children watched it intently. They watched the level, even stood on their seats to watch it. Because if anyone drank from that cup, that was a foretelling of long ago that the Messiah was present. The Jews waited for the Messiah from the time they first went into the Holy Land. It may be 1000 BC. Until the time of Jesus, they were still waiting. And because many of them didn't accept Christ, they continued to wait until this day. There's a very good story about some rabbis, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Joshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiba, and Rabbi Tarfon, who would all die in the year 136 AD. They had been at a Passover meal, and they argued until dawn how to tell the Messiah's presence when he had already been present with them for almost 90 years. The cup that Jesus took at the end of the meal was that cup of Elijah, when he blessed and gave it to his disciples, telling them, I am the Messiah, in simple and straightforward terms. That is the meaning of Messiah. Today they don't understand that Jesus has come, but we do. And I want to follow with a very special prayer. This is called the Kaddish, the Mourner's Kaddish. It says, exalted and hallowed be God's name. In this world of his creation, may his will be fulfilled and his sovereignty revealed in the days of your lifetime, and the life of the whole house of Israel, and speedily and soon. And say amen.